Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. I'm James and this is Clearwater Fishing, and today we're talking about what fishing lines you should use on your very first baitcaster. Let me sit y'all down and we'll start talking about it. Fishing lines in general can be extremely confusing, even for us more experienced anglers. There's so many different brands, so many different varieties of fishing line. What's good for you may not be appropriate for that situation, and vice versa. So let's talk a little bit about it. There's several different kinds. So you have fluorocarbon. This is Sunline fluorocarbon. I have Guggen Braid here. I have Fluoroclear, P-line Fluoroclear, which is a copolymer, and I even have some traditional trilene monofilament. And each one of these has a different purpose and has different techniques focused behind it. You as a first-time baitcast owner may be confused on what's best for your baitcaster and what's best for you in general. So I moved to a little bit of a fishier location just to get the fishing vibes going. So if you're a first-time baitcast owner, you're probably owning something like this Abu Garcia Black Max. Nothing wrong with it. I absolutely love it. Still have it as a spare reel. Absolutely great reel. I've used it for 2 or 3 years and it's caught hundreds of fish for me, and it's still pretty reliable. Braking system may be a little subpar, but other than that, it is a fantastic reel to start off with. But you probably have something like this and you're wondering what kind of line to put on this reel. You probably have the standard medium heavy 7-foot, 7'2" rod. If you're looking for the very first time, that would be my recommendation, is that kind of setup, because it is extremely versatile. And that's kind of what you're going for with your very first baitcaster, something that can do it all. But before we get into the fishing lines, my goal and purpose here is to give you a little bit of an education across the board about each fishing line, and then at the very end, I'll give you my recommendation on what exactly you should purchase for your very first baitcaster. So the very first line we're going to talk about is the granddaddy of them all, the bread and butter, the one that you probably already have on some fishing reels, and that is monofilament. Monofilament is a great overall fishing line. It has lots of great properties. It also has a few disadvantages as well. So let's talk about some of those advantages first. First of all, it is clear. Underwater, sometimes it'll catch a little bit of light and refract it back toward a fish. However, that's not really too big of a deal because overall it is a clear fishing line. Second property here is it likes to float. Floating fishing line does have its advantages as far as topwaters go, and it does have advantages in when you're trying to control the depth of your crankbaits. It doesn't really have too big of a deal when you're dealing with jigs or Texas rigs or Carolina rigs. It doesn't really affect them all that much, maybe a little slower on the fall rate. It does, however, really affect crankbaits. It will hinder your crankbaiting depth quite a bit, a foot or two, depending on the depth you're trying to reach. It will cause your crankbaits not to go down as deep. So the last thing I want to talk about monofilament for is one of its big disadvantages is if you leave it in sun, it becomes very brittle. It also will start to change colors and have this off-white color to it, so it will become visible underwater. That's why I recommend at least replacing it yearly, and if you go fishing a lot and have your lines out in the sun a lot, I would definitely recommend changing it more often than that. But great thing about monofilament, it is pretty dang cheap. You can get a spool of monofilament for as little as $3. This probably costs $6 or $7. I can't even remember this trilene extra smooth casting. I use it mostly as a leader material, but this stuff is pretty affordable. So if you need to respool your whole entire reel set, it's not a big deal, at least on your pocketbook. Hey guys, I want to pause the video for a moment and ask you guys to smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. We do all sorts of awesome fishing related content, from challenges to how-tos to technology introductions to boat maintenance videos, you name it. I promise you, you're going to find something on this channel that you like or that'll help you out. So make sure you smash that subscribe button because it's absolutely free. And you can always unsubscribe later if you wish. Now let's get back to it. The next line on my list is braid. I really have two different categories of braid, but either way, you can still see the line. It is pretty visible there. It is not a clear fishing line at all. So what is the advantage of braid? It is extremely, extremely strong. And the second advantage of it is if you use it on a spinning reel, you really avoid the line twist because braid doesn't have any memory. It doesn't have any curling effect on the line. It doesn't remember what spool it was on. When I take this off, it'll go into whatever shape I need it to be in. So it was really handy on the line twist piece on spinning reels. That's why I usually use 20-pound test on my spinning reels. But for baitcasters, I'm going to be using something a little stronger than that because I'm going to be using it for top water, I'm going to be using it for flipping. Something along those cases where I need a lot of strength. Other than that, braid has a really small diameter compared to its pound test. It's actually the smallest of all the lines we're going to talk about. It is like this, for example, we have 15 thousandths of an inch for 50-pound braid, and the 12-pound test mono that I just had, it was 13 thousandths. So it's almost the same size, but it's 38 pounds stronger. The third line we're going to talk about is typically viewed as the counterpart to monofilament, and that is fluorocarbon lines. Fluorocarbon lines are considered high-end fishing lines mainly because of their price tag. One of these fishing lines can run up to $20, $25, $35 for 250, and this one was, I think, 125 yards. Yeah, 125 yards. So you're not going to get a whole lot of bang for your buck as far as volume, but it does have some very unique properties. So the very first property is probably one of the most important, is that fluorocarbon is extremely clear underwater. It has a low refractive index, and it is going to refract or reflect less light toward fish, so they can't really see your line all that good. It has excellent durability in the sunlight. It won't get that much weaker, or it won't discolor as bad as monofilament. It will eventually over time, but it is definitely a longer lasting fishing line than mono. It's also got a higher strength to diameter ratio. For example, I think 12-pound test, I said it was 13 thousandths of an inch, where fluorocarbon here, 12-pound test, would also be 11 thousandths of an inch. May not seem that big of a difference, but overall it is stronger for a smaller diameter. At the exact same diameter, it's going to have a little less stretch than monofilament. So if you're fishing 12-pound test and 12-pound test, this will stretch just as much as monofilament would, but if you're fishing lines that are similar in diameter, the lines will stretch much differently. The monofilament will definitely stretch more than the fluorocarbon. The last property about fluorocarbon is it sinks in water. So unlike monofilament, this line is going to sink in the water column, add a little extra depth to your crankbaits, really not make a whole lot of difference on your bottom baits, jigs, Texas rigs, Carolina rigs, those type of things. It won't make a whole lot of difference there, but it will help you get a little more depth on your crankbaits. It's not advisable to use on topwaters because it'll usually affect the action of those topwater baits. The line sinking in the water, such as for a walking bait, it'll definitely hinder the action because you really depend on the slack on the top of the water to make that bait walk back and forth. Fluorocarbon is typically the choice of professional anglers, except for certain situations, they will definitely pick up monofilament over fluorocarbon in certain situations, but for us average anglers, it's really not that big of a deal. So the very last line we're going to talk about here is copolymer line. Copolymer line is simply a monofilament line that is fluorocarbon coated. This protects the monofilament from the UV rays and making it weaker during fishing trips, or if you leave it outside, It also keeps it from having that off color. And since it's coated in fluorocarbon, it does still have a lower refractive index than that of its monofilament counterpart. It is much more expensive than fluorocarbon, but it's still quite comparable to monofilament. So honestly, I do use this quite a bit, or at least I used to. I've started to either choosing between fluorocarbon and monofilament in most choices instead of trying to go with the in-between. That's just a personal preference, but as far as properties go, it's still going to follow quite a bit like monofilament. It's still going to float a little bit. It may sink after it absorbs some water. If you use it a bunch or over a lot of time, it will probably eventually start sinking a little bit. But it's still a solid line if you just want to step up your game just a little bit, but you don't want to crank out the $35 for a fluorocarbon. So that brings me to the part where I get to recommend a fishing line for your very first bait caster. Now, there's the 4 kinds I brought out here, and there's many different kinds of brands. But let's talk about your first bait caster in general first. A very good property to have for your very first bait caster is a rather large diameter line. I'm not talking about trying to go with a massive 60, 70 pound monofilament. I'm just a little bit larger, so it's a little stiffer and is less likely to bird's nest. That brings me to monofilament. It has the one of the lower strength to diameter ratios there are, so in order to get a higher pound test, you are going to have to go up in diameter size. Now, why is that important? It will help you from backlashing as much, causing those bird's nest. You'll be able to feel it on your reel much sooner after you cast. When it starts to backlash, you'll be able to use your thumb and slow it down. And okay, we're all new at some point with a bait caster, and even me, myself, I backlash pretty awful at times. Sometimes it's like, man, do I even really want to mess with trying to pick this out? It's so bad, especially if it's my only reel or rod and reel that I have with me. Sometimes it's just worth cutting it off. I feel a whole lot better about cutting off some $7 monofilament than I do $35 fluorocarbon. So I'm less likely to sit there and be frustrated trying to pick out a bird's nest, especially on a fishing day. You know, you don't have a whole lot of time or you're limited in time, and you just make a silly catch and look at, oh man, I got this awful bird's nest. It'd be just quicker to pull my bait in, cut this off, reline it, and be on the fishing than spend 30 minutes trying to pick out a bird's nest. So I kind of pointed this out during the properties, but monofilament is extremely versatile. You can use it for topwater. You can use it for the bottom baits. You can use it for cranks. You can use it for jerk baits. You can use it for spinner baits. All sorts of baits. Is an extremely versatile bait. Unlike the fluorocarbon counterpart, it's not really all that good at the topwater stuff. So if you're just beginning, definitely consider you doing topwater, because once you start learning how to catch fish on topwater, you're going to be hooked forever. But monofilament will allow you to fish those topwater baits and not be frustrated at the action that you're getting out of them. Now that we've decided that monofilament is the best, what pound test should you get? For me, personally, I'm thinking like a 15 or a 17 pound test. Something that you really can lay the wood in and you don't have to worry about the monofilament breaking, even if you use it for extended periods of time of over a year. A little bit stronger line will definitely serve you well, and also will serve you well as you're learning how to cast your bait caster, because it will be a little thicker. And as you get better at casting with bait casters, you can go to smaller lines, more finessey techniques. Especially if you fish a lot of extremely clear water, definitely important to downsize your line when those situations arise. But if you're just getting out started bass fishing, definitely pick out something that's pretty hefty. The 15 to 17 pound test is a solid choice. Alright guys, as always, let me know in the comments below if you have any more questions about fishing lines, bait casters, or anything fishing related. And if I forgot something, which is highly possible, let everybody know down in the comments below. We all are here to share information. No offense taken. can't get all the information out in a few minute video. But I do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video to the end. And remember, if you learned something from this video or enjoyed it, be sure to smash that like button and share it with your friends. We're here to grow. By the end of the year, I'm trying to hit 4,000 subscribers. So if you're here after 4,000 subscribers, let me know down in the comments. But thank you guys so much for watching. And just like always, get out there and go catch you some fish. That's really hard to do. Okay, that didn't work out.